I'm so excited for this, guys. Our guest today is a health coach. If you are well versed in the carnivore community or carnivore space, you would know who she is from her growing community on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. She shares her knowledge and experience to help others succeed on their health journey. She is the founder of the Black Carnivore community on Facebook, and she is also the host of the Black Carnivore podcast. She is here with us today to talk story. I'm here with Ede Fox. I hope I said that right. Um, Ede, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and happy to, to talk about my experiences and hope that that is helpful to your audience.
Thank you for coming on Ede. Love your story. I love your show on YouTube. Funny story. Before I started my own podcast in October last year, your channel on YouTube gave me a lot of insight on how to start my own podcast. So you have had incredible guests on your show. It absolutely motivated me to share my own journey, share other people's journey with my listeners, and your pages, Facebook, your Instagram, and your YouTube channel, they provide such great value to the whole community. So I just want to thank you on doing that. Love what you do, on what you built. So thank you so much. So I'd like to tap into your experiences today because I believe that our story paints a picture, a very clear picture for everyone, to the listeners who strives to make a change, right? Maybe they're struggling to take action, or they did take action but just struggles to stay consistent. We all have different journeys. People discover the community, the keto community, and the carnivore community from all walks of life. You can speak. You can speak to this better than I could. It all comes down to this search for something better, right? Wanting to better ourselves. Let's get into your story. Super interesting to me. You dabbled in Atkins, keto, and now you've been in the carnivore space for many years now. We'll talk about keto and then carnivore in a second. I'd like to talk about your prior relationship with food before keto.
hmm Yeah. So, my relationship with food goes way back,
Mhm.
and it was a challenging one for many years. So now I know that I am addicted to sugar, and that has sort of informed the way I have behaved around food over decades, really. And I think that my family history, I think that I have a lot of people in my family who are addicted to sugar. And so sort of the use of sugar for for emotional reasons, and also triggering that reward system in your brain, like that that comes down over generations. So I struggled with my weight, from a very young age. I was certainly I was put on a diet, starting at age 8. And I was always had some anxiety about weight. And
Mm.
by so in my early 20s, I reached a very high weight for myself. And I I think it was like in the late 90s that the Atkins sort of put out a fourth
Mm.
iteration of his book, and it became like really popular. And so I, like everyone, decided to get on it. But it kind of worked pretty
So
well for
is
me.
it, sorry to cut you up, is it
hmm
you're getting on it as a short-term goal, as a
hmm
diet for the summertime? Oh, is this a
hmm
summer goal, or what, how did you look at it? Or is it like something that you want to do, like a lifestyle?
hmm No, it was just a diet, really.
Mm-hmm.
And but at the time, I had been trying to become a vegetarian, and been I was very active politically and social justice causes, and in in that community. I mean, vegetarianism kind of walks hand in hand with
Mm-hmm.
social justice, although I do not believe that that is actually true. And I think one can eat meat and be very concerned about social justice. But at the time, those things kind of in my head and the communities that I walked in, they seemed to go hand in hand. So I had been trying very hard to. There was a book called I think it was the McDougall. It maximum weight loss diet or something like that, and it was like vegan, no fat, and just like lots of vegetables, lots of rice, some potatoes, that kind of thing. And so I had been trying to do that, and of course, that was just an abysmal failure for me. And so when I did the Atkins, it was really just as a diet, and it was not something that lasted, and frankly, looking back, I don't see how I could have done what I was doing, what I'm doing now in my late 20s. Because,
Sorry, for some of us that doesn't know what Atkins is, can you describe what does Atkins entail? What do you eat, or what's the focus of Atkins?
Sure. Well, back then, it basically, you start out on with ketogenic macros. So basically, you're having like 2 cups of vegetables, any kind of meat you want, a limited amount of cheese, and a small amount of berries. And that's what you would eat. And then after you started losing weight, you would start adding like 5 grams of carbs a week to your daily, program per week, until you stop losing weight. And then you start, you back up a little bit. And that's how you would sort of figure out what your ideal carbohydrate rate was. So that was back then what was done. I know now that going up for me was like a total disaster, and I would not recommend that. Like, if you get yourself down to ketogenic levels and you're losing, don't start adding carbs. Like, that's not going to be helpful for you. But I realize now also that what I'm doing now, I don't think I could have done in my late 20s, because, I was going out with friends and we'd be out the club. And then at 2 a.m., you go to, I was in LA, so we'd go to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles. And, there were all sorts of things that I was doing. So it was really hard for me to feel like I was doing something that was very different from everybody else. So I don't know, I don't know what I would do in my late 20s. I know I would have benefited extremely by eating this way that I'm eating now, but socially it would have been challenging.
So have you felt on Atkins, have you felt the benefits of like, let's say, the keto clarity that they talk about in keto? Do you experience that in the Atkins diet? What were I know you talked about in your late 20s that what hinders you is you were going out with friends, and it just really isn't sustainable for you. But do you experience any benefits? What were the best benefits that you've had experience on while you're on Atkins?
Yeah. Well, so back then, I definitely felt, clear-headed, full, satisfied, lots of energy. So I was getting the benefits. I just, when you're 28, the differences between, your worst self and your best self are, they're not so big. But when you're 50, the differences are significant. But in 2015, that I continued to eat low carb off and on over the years, but low carb for me was sort of hovering around 35 to 50 grams of carbs. And so I think I was regularly sort of moving in and out of ketosis. I was still going out and drinking and a lot of alcohol, and I think that even when you're keeping your carbs very low, if you're drinking a lot of alcohol, that's essentially sugar, and it's not a health product. So I think you can maintain that way, but I don't think you can necessarily lose, and I don't know that you're going to get a lot of healing. But in 2015, I reached my all-time high weight for, my lifetime, and of 246 pounds. And I felt awful all the time. I was just exhausted. I had a lot of aches and pains and joint pains and inflammation and everything. It was hard for me to stay awake. I just was in terrible shape. So I decided to go on a diet and, try to address my health. And this time I was not doing keto or Atkins. I just decided to cut calories.
Mm,
And I did that for a bit and it was kind of successful. And then I switched over to a low carb diet and like it was like instantly,
mm,
I felt better. I mean, I felt like the improvements that I saw in 2 weeks were so dramatic and they just didn't line up with how much weight I had lost. Like the
mm,
amount of weight I had lost couldn't account for how much better I felt. And so I was really fascinated by that and continued to to sharpen and refine the
mm,
way that I was doing, the way that I was doing keto.
mm,
And well, we weren't even using the word keto at the time, but the way
mm,
I was doing low carb and to do more research and try to understand why it was so effective.
mm,
So that was, that was really helpful. And the benefits that I felt were, tons more energy.
mm,
The inflammation went away, aches and pains in my joints went away. I woke up feeling, refreshed,
mhm, mhm,
which was not something that was happening before.
mhm, mhm,
And then I kind of got to the point where I felt like exercising. So it wasn't like I was just dragging myself,
mhm.
to the gym, but it would be like, wow, it's a nice evening. Why don't I get off the subway 3 stops
Yeah,
early and
and
walk
that
walk
never
the rest
happened
of the way?
before. You're
Hmm.
saying you had the urge that you never had before to exercise. That's interesting because I want to talk about
Hmm.
like growing up, and I wouldn't imagine having a podcast having this consistency for a year, or even just finishing a book even. I just didn't have the focus, and
Hmm.
all of a sudden when I started keto, I have all this energy to do all of this. Like I could not
Hmm.
imagine having to finish books before, in the past when I was in high school growing up. I just have no focus on anything, and I attribute that to when I started keto. And that's
Hmm.
why it's interesting. You talk about having that urge to exercise that you'd never
Hmm.
experienced before. You've never thought of exercising, but now you have all of this energy that you have, and now you're thinking, I want to exercise. But go ahead. Sorry, I just want to
Hmm.
point that out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, mentally, I, was also much more together. I mean, I, towards the end of, my time before I started really trying to get my health under control, like, like you, I had a hard time concentrating and a hard time just staying focused and
Mm-hmm.
staying awake
Mm-hmm.
and being able to get in that feeling of flow. I mean, I've experienced flow throughout my life, where you get so into a project
Mm-hmm.
that you look up and like 3 hours has passed and you haven't even noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And I really missed that feeling. And and so once I got into ketosis and got fat adapted, my brain, was healing and
Mm-hmm.
changing such that, I was able to start to experience that where I could sit down and read for a couple of hours and not, fall asleep or,
Mm-hmm.
keep reach for my phone or look to see, what distraction could be there,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. Have you dabbled into the science of that? Just um, having to focus, having this clarity, having this focus that you've never experienced before, or the inflammation in your body. Have you ever dabbled into the science of that? Of just how fat uh, is more efficient on giving the body more energy and more your brain more clarity. Have you ever dabbled into the science?
I mean, I read as much as I can about, about these things. So from what I understand, a lot of people who follow a carnivore diet seem to experience a lot of mental health improvements that
Mm,
I don't necessarily see on keto. I mean, sometimes you see it, but sometimes you don't. But on carnivore, it seems like universally
mm,
people experience a significant amount of improvement in mental health, all kinds of mental health stuff. So
mm,
from depression to memory problems to
mm,
OCD, all kinds of things. And from what I've read, it seems like well, one, the greater amount of protein
mm,
is, these are the building blocks that your brain uses to
mm,
create, the various neurotransmitters and things that are used to create your mood,
mm,
and for the brain to communicate with itself. And then you've got like, the ends of the neurons, those myelin sheaths are made of fat.
mm,
So, the more animal fat that you're eating, you're actually providing the building blocks, the physical building blocks for your brain to do the work that it needs to do. And then you're also bringing down the sugar.
mm,
So you can have insulin resistance in your body, but you can also have it in your brain, which causes inflammation and
mm,
problems and damage to brain cells. So as you bring down
mm,
your insulin resistance and the sugar in your body, you're also improving your brain,
mm,
and that and then the seed oils that a lot of people eat. So there's well, I mean, you can get fat from multiple places, right?
mm,
So on a carnivore diet, you're getting it almost exclusively from animal fat. But on a keto, on some keto diets, and then on a regular standard American diet, most of the fat is actually coming from seed oils, which are
mm,
highly, highly processed and
mm,
very inflammatory, and and cause a lot of damage to all
mm,
of your cells, and including
mm,
brain cells. So when you remove the seed oils, you're also removing a lot of inflammation, which is
mm,
damaging brain cells as well as other cells. So I think that when I went carnivore, when I went keto, I was eating a lot of olive oil. And so monosaturated
mm,
fats like
mm,
olive oil and avocado oil are, are sort of in the neutral, category. Um, but I was, I'm sure I was still eating some seed oils.
mm,
And, but when I went carnivore and really took all of that out, I
mm,
saw a dramatic increase in health. So even as much as I saw a huge benefit going from the standard American diet to a keto diet, and I
mm,
didn't think that I could feel much better than that.
mm,
But then when I went carnivore, it was like, again, a massive leveling
mm,
up of health. And I couldn't imagine that I could feel that much better, but I did.
mm,
And it was pretty dramatic and pretty quick. So, so even though I lost weight on keto and I felt better, there were certain things that didn't resolve. So I still had, my autoimmune stuff. So I had asthma, eczema, and allergies that were still, uncontrolled on keto. And when I took out dairy and took out the vegetables, my
mm.
asthma completely disappeared. I stopped using
Is
my
what
inhaler.
have you ever got an explanation on how that worked? Because that's interesting. Yeah,
Mhm.
have you ever got that? Yeah.
Well, so I've had problems with breathing off and on through my life, but I
Mm,
hadn't been diagnosed with asthma until it was like
mm,
2018,
mm,
January of 2018. And that was like December, January was like the absolute worst of
mm,
my asthma. Like it was totally out of control at that point. And I had to go to urgent care twice for not being able to breathe. And then
mm,
and they referred me to a pulmonologist, and I went through all these studies and blah blah blah. And so it was determined that I had as allergy induced asthma. So
mm,
basically, there the I'm when I'm irritated by something, my what are they called, alveoli, or my bronchial tubes, swell and inflame.
mm,
So just like if you have allergies and you're breathing in ragweed and
mm.
your eyes
Yeah.
water and your nose gets stuffy, it's essentially the same thing is happening but in my
Mm,
lungs.
mm,
And that's why I couldn't breathe. And so when I was at urgent care, I mean, basically they gave me prednisone pills, they gave me multiple kinds of inhaled
Mm.
steroids. I
Yeah.
had to get on a nebulizer for 10 minutes when I first got there because I couldn't breathe enough for them to be able to even listen to my lungs.
Mm.
So, so then I understood, like, this was a massive problem, but I didn't know at the time that it was dairy. So I just, took the medicines they said to take and blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
And then, like, a few months later, I'd seen people talking. People regularly talk about dairy as being a problem, and everybody is like, "Oh, but that's not me." And then, because I used to be lactose intolerant, and my stomach would get upset when I drank milk or ate dairy products. And
Mhm.
then, when I went keto, I think that lowered my inflammation enough that I was able to eat dairy without it upsetting my stomach.
Mm.
So I had been eating dairy for a couple of years with no problem. So I thought, well, I'm not lactose intolerant, but that's not the only place that dairy impacts your body.
Mm.
So
Right.
when I actually went ahead and did the experiment, I wasn't even really thinking about it. I just decided, to stop to do the experiment. And
Mm.
then about 10 days later, um, I was out with my mom and I was hungry, and she had some of those Parmesan, chips. I think they were called Wisps. They're, just
Wisp,
little
yeah.
cheese cracker things. So I was hungry and I was like, okay, well, let me have some of these. And I didn't even have a whole serving. I had like two, it was
Mhm.
very small. And within an hour, I needed my inhaler. And then at
Mhm.
that point, I realized I hadn't used my inhaler for the last 10 days. And I had been, before that, I had been using I had like a
Yeah.
rescue inhaler
Yeah.
as well as the inhaled steroids.
Mm.
And I was still using my rescue inhaler like once a day or once every other day. So, my asthma was not under control,
Mhm.
at all. And then I was like, oh my God, I haven't used any of this
Mm.
stuff. And I hadn't even thought
So
about
you
using.
discovered this almost accidentally, because having that,
Yeah.
not having to use your asthma inhaler for 10 days, and now you're having, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
dairy.
And that's right. And I didn't know that that was what was going to happen. Like,
Mm.
I thought, people kept saying dairy, you should try going without dairy and see what happens. So
Mm.
I didn't know
Mm.
what the effects would be. I mean, I assumed, maybe, I don't know, maybe I would lose a little more weight, or I don't know,
Yeah.
what I would feel more energetic. This was not on my radar. So that was huge. And of course, everybody loves cheese. So I'm like, oh man,
Mhm.
and I had about a pound of fancy cheese at home. So I was
Mhm.
like, oh, I do not want to not eat this. So I decided to experiment and, like, reintroduce it, see
Mhm.
what happened, and cut it out for a couple more days. And I did this,
Mhm.
4 times, because
Mhm.
and I really wanted to be careful. Like, so,
Yeah.
I would give myself like 4 or 5 days between eating it so that, everything could
Mhm.
calm down,
Mhm.
and then do it again. And each and every time, like within an hour or two, I needed my inhaler.
Mm.
So it was clear. There was no question. So yeah, so I cut it out, and that was dramatic. And then I also cut out, I stopped drinking alcohol, and I cut out coffee, and that was huge. And so I think simultaneously, like, I caught up on sleep, I had a
Mm.
lot of brain healing.
Mm.
I was eating a lot of animal fats. And something that I don't think a lot of people are, think about, is that when you're coming from the standard American diet, even if you're like very obese, you're very often malnourished, which, I don't think that people think about that.
Mhm.
But if you have been eating a diet of, processed
Yep.
non-foods,
Yep.
essentially, like, you're not
Mhm.
getting nutrition. So you might be over caloried, but you are not,
Mm.
you're not, you don't have the nutrition.
Mhm.
So I think when people early on go into a keto or carnivore
Mhm.
diet, and they're for the first time, really eating a significant portion of their diet from whole foods, a lot of stuff is going on. There's a lot of
Mm.
healing, a lot of catching up.
Mm.
And so, for me, when I first went carnivore, even though I came from keto and I had begun to eat better
mm,
on carnivore, it was a whole other level of health,
mm,
that I was getting by eating, whole animal foods,
mm,
whole animal fat, some organ meats, and taking out the things that were really irritating me.
mm,
I, probably was going through a bunch of oxalate dumping too in the
mm,
beginning,
mm,
which is a whole other conversation,
mm.
and getting caught up on my sleep, which, I try to remember to talk about that more, but sleep is like, this is a huge part of this whole,
Yeah,
process of getting healthy. And I don't think people give it enough credit either.
that's so interesting. Because you didn't even know that. I didn't even know that dairy causes asthma, too. To be honest with you, that's the first time I'm hearing it. Um, it's just so interesting because
Well, I want to be clear. It causes inflammation, and wherever in your
right,
body you are weak, that's
right.
where the inflammation will be. So for me,
Mm,
it was my skin with eczema, my
mm,
allergies in my nose, and the
mm.
asthma in my lungs. But for other people, it's IBS, so
Yeah,
their
yeah.
digestive system is where the inflammation is. For other people, it's acne.
Mm,
For other people, it's brain stuff. So I
mm,
just want to
mm.
make that clear.
Thank you for that clarification. And it's just so interesting because a lot of people that transition into the carnivore diet, you would think, oh, how could they let go of cheese, dairy, you know, keto sweets or whatnot? A lot of things you have to cut out from your diet. And from your story, it seems like you were freed from all of these ailments that you're experiencing, and that became worth it for you to transition. Um, wow, that's there's a lot here.
Well, and just to help your listeners
Mhm,
kind of wrap their heads around this,
mhm,
I'm not a person who advocates taking all these things out of your diet for no reason. I
mhm,
mean, there's I there's no prize to being, the most carnivore, the strictest
mhm,
carnivore. The prize is your own health.
mhm,
So if you take some of these things out and literally nothing happens and you see no
mhm,
improvement, then, bring them back
yeah,
in. Like, they're
mhm,
not a problem.
mhm,
Not everybody has a problem with dairy. Not everyone has a problem with artificial
mhm,
sweeteners.
mhm,
But if you are struggling to lose weight, if you're still struggling with insulin resistance, if you're still struggling with inflammation, then you do have to look at these
mhm,
things. So like in my community where, I'm not super strict, so the way I kind of talk about it, we have three sort of approaches to
mhm,
doing carnivore. So one is strict carnivore, where you're really only eating from the animal kingdom. And then I put, a caveat around eggs and dairy, because that's a thing that a lot of people have problems with. So you got to
mhm,
test for yourself to see if you have a problem with it. If
mhm,
you don't eat them, if you do, don't eat them. And
mhm,
then more moderate carnivore, where you include low sugar fruits and like olives and avocados,
mhm,
and you might include spices and herbs, for cooking and whatnot. And then relaxed carnivore, where you might also include artificial sweeteners, or if you go out to a restaurant and you decide to have, the sides that come with
mhm,
your meal, or you occasionally eat, salad or some other kind of vegetable. And then, you can move fluidly between these. So you might choose to have a carnivore breakfast of bacon and eggs, carnivore lunch, and then, a salad, some kind of salad and steak at dinner. Or you might choose to be all week very strict
mhm,
carnivore, and then on the weekends be more relaxed with your family and, going out and all that kind of stuff. So
mhm,
it's kind of up to you, and
mhm,
you kind of decide how good you want to feel. So for me, like, I have a lot of allergies and other stuff. And so for me, I do best when I'm very strict, but other people don't need to be. And,
mhm.
it's really kind of up to you.
I love that. Because yeah, you're right. Sometimes, certain things, certain food items, causes inflammation in one person. It may not cause inflammation in the other. It's just knowing what your body feels like. and just being self-aware of what you eat and being mindful. I love that. And I'd like to talk about, like, sometimes loads of people having great success with your coaching. What is the most memorable thing that a client said to you that you could remember?
Um, well, I had one a client who was working on her blood pressure, and within a week of starting Carnivore, it
Mhm.
dropped 20 points.
Mm,
And that had been, a real struggle for her. I've definitely seen multiple people come off of their diabetes medication like within 6 weeks of starting.
mhm,
And I had, well, one woman who was just, such a delightful and talented
mhm,
woman who was struggling because she had had a concussion and a couple of years ago, and that had,
mhm,
ultimately kept her from working, from being able to read.
mhm,
The doctors were, really unable. They couldn't do much for her. And so she, her life became very small, and,
mhm,
a lot of the activities that she used to like to do, she couldn't do anymore. And I encouraged her to to get beef fat
mhm,
trimmings and
mhm,
eat them every day. And she, wow, I mean, it was like within a few weeks she
mhm,
was able to start, creating again,
mhm.
doing her artwork, and like thinking
Yeah.
about going back to work. And it was
Mhm,
like, man, years, she had lost like 3 years,
yeah.
messing around with this, and just making sure that she was eating a super dense,
Mhm,
nutrient dense diet with a lot of animal fat, just turn that around. So,
mhm,
whenever I see people who are struggling with mental health and, just any kind of brain stuff, like just bumping that fat up
mhm,
and actually eating fat. I see people who want to eat, want to buy oils, buy
mhm,
fat that's been processed, but like, that doesn't seem to bring about the benefits
mhm,
that just eating a whole fat
mhm.
does.
So many people I've interviewed about their carnivore lifestyle have experienced and told stories about how carnivore has given them so much freedom. What freedom that means. I heard you also talk about, the huge benefit of carnivore diet with mental health. Um, I mean, success is a very subjective topic. We have different definitions of it when we start a lifestyle. But are there any telltale signs that you already know that this client has a very high chance of success, or something you could just see that they want it, that they really want it? What are those signs for you, like for a client?
Well, I mean, I think that you have to be ready to do
Mm,
this.
mm,
And that's what's really going to determine success or not. Some people are, I mean, to be fair and to be honest, a carnivore diet is so different and goes against everything that you are being
goes
taught by
against
your
everything.
doctor,
Mm,
yeah, by magazines, by culture, by, just people around you. And
mm,
so, the people who are tend to be willing to try this are usually people who are very, very ill and, have a lot of problems. And or they're the kind of people who just are fine going against the grain.
mm,
And that's an interesting type of person, I
mm,
will say, and
mm,
they're always fun. So I usually say to people, like, look, it's going to take some time. There's a transition period. Like, you're switching your body over from one fuel source to another, and your body may never have done this before. So, there's definitely going to be a transition. You're not going to feel good for a certain period of time. And I'm going to do everything I can to try to, reduce that. But, you
mm,
know, there's going to be some challenges, and there's
mm,
going to be some cravings, and so I
mm,
try to prepare people for that. But I can see people who are not ready for that level of commitment. And
mm,
so I mean, I don't really try to get people who aren't ready to
mm,
do it.
mm.
It's just kind of like, it's up to you.
Uh-huh.
I'm here, I'll be here when you're
Yeah.
ready,
Yeah.
come back. And I think that people who have a real sugar addiction, also, they're not going to be successful unless they really are ready to deal with that and
Mm-hmm.
want to deal with it. um, there's having, if you have an addiction, to sugar, having completely abstaining and cutting it all out is the path to freedom,
Mm-hmm.
and and to not having cravings.
Mm-hmm.
But those people are, you get on a
Mm-hmm.
carnivore diet, and there's no, there's no place to get that sweet
Mm-hmm.
craving dealt with. On keto, there are treats. You can
Mm-hmm.
have you're allowed to
Right.
have a certain amount
Mm-hmm.
of chocolate or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't do that on carnivore. And so,
Mm-hmm.
that you got to deal with. So those are people too who have a challenge with carnivore.
You also talked about having sugar addiction, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
how were you able to do it? What if somebody that has a sugar addiction? I know that's hard to. You got to be brutally honest with yourself to and self-aware to be able to come to that conclusion. But if one has and is aware of having sugar addiction, how does one start or take action when they dug themselves into a hole that is hard to get out of? What's the first step, do you think?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, so, I'm not an addiction specialist, so, take all of this with a grain of salt. But I think that when, for people who are struggling with this,
Hmm.
so if you are that person who intends to have, a spoonful of the pint of ice cream that's in the freezer, and then next thing you know, the whole pint is gone. If you're that person who wants to just have a taste, and then you've eaten a dozen donuts, you know you may not call it addiction, but that you really are struggling to control your behavior around it. And even though there are people who can moderate their use of these types of foods, you can't. And so the problem is that we're being told by the producers of these snack foods and these candies and things, that it's just a matter of moderation, and if you are overeating them, it's your own fault. But that's not true. I mean, sugar is, in and of itself, it is addictive, and so some people struggle more with it than others. But a lot of us are struggling.
Hmm.
Don't feel like you're alone.
Hmm.
So if you feel like that's you, cutting out all sweet taste is going to make it a lot easier for you, because you're not then
Hmm.
going to have to be moderating and controlling how much of the substance you have. And I'm sure if somebody said to you, why don't you moderate your use of cocaine or crack, you would think that was crazy, because
Hmm.
it's not easy to do. Like,
No.
once you're addicted to these things, there's no amount that is a
Yeah.
safe and appropriate amount.
Hmm.
And I would say the same about sugar. And so once you take out the complex carbohydrates, which just break down to simple carbohydrates and simple sugar,
Hmm.
as well as taking out the processed
Hmm.
carbohydrates, like
Hmm.
cookies and ice cream and cake and donuts, everything smooths out and calms
Hmm.
down, and you can live without cravings,
Hmm.
which I don't think, most people who struggle with this may not imagine
Hmm.
what it can be like to
Hmm.
be without cravings. But you can go days without
Hmm.
thinking about any of these foods, but you have to take them all out. You can't keep any portion
Hmm.
of them in.
Hmm.
And it means also taking out artificial sweeteners, because the sweet taste just keeps that whole cycle
Hmm.
in your brain alive. So once you take it all out, there's a whole other world out here.
Hmm. Well, it's hard. It's definitely hard to do it alone, right? That's why I love
Hmm.
your Facebook community. How important is having a community around you to build this new lifestyle? Because you don't know what you're doing. You can't do this alone. We've seen that from a lot of people that are just wanting to started, can't stay consistent. How important is accountability in your community, and how important is a community around you to be able to be successful?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. This way of eating is very different. We're going against, quote unquote experts. We're going against companies that spend billions of dollars to market, advertise, or create products that reach, a bliss point for all humans. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we're going against a lot to say no to all of that
Mm-hmm.
and to not consume it. And so you do need a lot of support, because when your whole family is like, well, this is crazy. What are you doing? I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not giving up my Oreos, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what you you want me to keep them in my room or some other
Yeah.
place? And yeah, so you need to have other people who are, say to you, look, you're not crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for most of us, like, who come to this diet, we don't really realize that there's other people doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you might feel completely alone in your
Mm-hmm.
town or your city,
Mm-hmm.
although there probably are other people doing
Most
the
people are
diet.
alone in their households too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Absolutely. So that's why you need to have this community. But over time, I think a lot of families like get on board.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my clients, she told me that her family, like, they used to have like pizza night, every Friday night, or, get like various kinds of junk food, and like,
Mm-hmm.
have a social night with kids and everything. And she didn't want to not do that. And, but she didn't do it for a little while to get herself like on carnivore, and then she did it again. And the difference for her, it was not about weight, but it was really about her mental function. And she said, the kids in the family, like, the next time the Friday night rolled up, they were like, you don't need to do this. And they basically said, like, we like you better when you're following this carnivore diet. You're like much calmer, much, just nicer, more
Mm.
patient. Like, they just liked her better. And so they supported her in doing it, and, kind of shifted around how they did the Friday night and what they did.
Mhm.
And I think that in a lot of cases, it takes time, but I think that people do start to notice improvements, not only in your weight in your body, but your behavior, your outlook, and all of that. And, hopefully, if you have, a
Mhm.
supportive or, loving family, they want to see you succeed with, and to see you do well. And so
Mhm.
want to support whatever it
Mhm.
takes to help you to get to that. So, yeah, so I think over time, families, come around, but you need
They do.
support, until that happens.
They do.
And then,
They might
yeah,
think you're crazy at first, but they do come around when they see those benefits. But go ahead, sorry.
yeah, yeah. But there are still some people who struggle. They know this is the right way of eating and they want to do it, but they're struggling to, to consistently, to roll it out.
Mhm.
And so that was why I started my coaching program, because, I kind of wanted to dig in and understand what was going on with people in a way that, you can't really do on video, or like,
Mhm.
in a direct
Personal
message
level.
on Instagram. Yeah. And so when I started doing this sort of high touch group coaching program, then I could kind of see the things that were happening day to day that were a problem. So in my program, people send me pictures of their food every day, and I can see what they're eating. And then, and so then I could see, oh, you're actually not eating enough fat. You think you are, but you're not,
Mhm. Mhm.
eating enough fat,
Mhm.
or you're not eating enough food,
Mhm.
or you're trying to incorporate too much fasting too soon, or I can see that a lot of times people are like, oh, this diet isn't working, I'm not losing weight.
Mhm.
And then when I start digging in, I see they've lost like 3 pant sizes, but because nothing's happened on the scale, they're like, oh, it's not working. But if I hadn't gotten them to take photographs and be able to compare the photographs, like, a lot of times I have to take the photographs, put them side to side, take my Apple Pencil, draw on them, point at the places that I see that are getting smaller, and send that to them so that they're actually visually able to see. And that, makes all the difference. Because, a lot of times, like, nothing's happening on the scale for quite some time, but, that's okay. Like, to me, like, only you see that number on
Mm,
the scale, but
mm.
everybody can see exactly how tight your pants are. So that's the measurement that really, that's the measurement that matters.
What's a typical week for your clients? Is it more education? Just you got to know all of this stuff because going from a standard American diet to keto, there's a lot of things I didn't know. There's a lot of things that are demonized in the standard American diet that you have to take in consideration in keto. So what's the first week like for your clients, and is it more mindset building? Is it more education? How do they start?
Well, I the first week is really more about like getting the mechanics of the diet together because I think that there's, like you said, there's a lot of miseducation or a lot of leftover pieces of
Mhm,
information about diet that will trip you up if you're trying to employ them on a carnivore diet. So getting people comfortable with using more salt and making sure that they're using enough,
mhm,
getting people more comfortable with eating enough food, period. We're in this diet mentality, you're always trying to eat less and less, and like
mhm,
that does not serve you on a carnivore diet. You need to eat enough food. Getting people to eat enough fat, getting people to
mhm,
eat ruminant animals or red meat or beef,
mhm,
or if they don't eat beef, lamb, goat, elk, bison, whatever.
mhm,
That's a big deal.
mhm,
And I try to slowed people down from jumping right into fasting,
mhm,
um, because I think if you're not fat adapted, it can be hard,
mhm,
and it can raise the cortisol and other stressful hormones in your
mhm,
body, which is
mhm.
not a good thing.
Yeah.
So, so slowing down like the fasting and stuff until you're ready. And so that's kind of what's happening in the beginning, like just getting the mechanics of the diet down. And once that happens, that usually alleviates the problems that are sending the person to start cheating
Mhm,
and so on. And so then they understand why they're having these cheats and fall offs and why
mhm,
it's difficult for them to be consistent. And some of it is like physically based. You're not eating enough food, you're not eating enough fat, you're not preparing your meals ahead of time so that you're ready
mhm,
when
mhm,
XYZ circumstance happens. But they also then have the space to start thinking about what are the emotional things that are driving them to this behavior and to be able to start to deal with them. So I don't know, I can't necessarily help you like when your boss yells at you that you want to eat, but now and you physically are shored up so that you're not hungry and you're not
mhm,
already stressed out, and so you can then employ breathing techniques and all the other stuff that you might
mhm,
learn to deal with emotional stuff. You can employ those because you don't
mhm.
have like this basic physical drive to eat running at the same time.
Does it help going on keto first before carnivore? Um,
I mean,
mhm,
I still think that there's a big transition from keto to carnivore, but certainly there's a bigger one still
mhm,
from
mhm.
uh, standard American diet. But I
Yeah.
I think the people who get to come to me have usually done keto before,
Mm,
but they haven't. Usually, when people come to me, like I also have these monthly challenges going now, and
mhm,
I did one in November. I'm starting one December 1st, and I probably will do one in January 1st. And usually, when people come to a challenge, they've been off track, and they want to use this to get them back on track.
Thanksgiving.
And yeah, right. Well, that's why I'm doing it. I wanted people to go into Thanksgiving on solid footing, really having had a couple of weeks to like be solidly eating properly. And then starting December 1st to have a hard stop to whatever eating happened over Thanksgiving. There's a hard stop and you restart on December 1st and then, go for 3 weeks. And then, you do what you're going to do on
Mhm,
Christmas and then, let's start, well, I'm going to say, January 1st or January 2nd. For some
Mm.
people, it's hard to get started on the first, but get started again like that. And so hopefully that those,
Mhm.
syncopated stops will help you to keep from going too crazy. But so a lot of times people are coming to me having eaten, for 4 to 6 weeks, a lot of everything. So basically back on the standard American diet. So, you can come to it from either way and you will see benefit either way.
How do you balance being accountable and not being too hard on yourself? Most of the time, during Thanksgiving, for example, they obviously you're with family. You wanna socialize, right? Maybe your uncle cooked this meal and every Thanksgiving, and that's the only time you would have that meal in Thanksgiving. So how do they bounce back from that when you clearly can't kick yourself already? You're already down. What do you say to them when they're obviously think that they have fallen off, and what's the mindset just getting back up?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've actually done a couple of videos about it this week and last week. So, I think that you want to have a strategy for how you want to handle the holidays. And to me, there's three different approaches. One, you could say I'm going to stay completely on plan, and I'm not going to eat anything that's not, carnivore or whatever I decide I'm eating. Two, you can decide I'm going to go keto. And
Mm-hmm.
so I will include some low carbohydrate dishes and, things that are still vegetables, but, not too bad. So I'm not suggesting the candied yams, but maybe, a baked sweet potato. And then the third approach is to just say, to heck with it. I'm going to eat it all. And I'm just going to have a defined period in which I'm going to eat. And then I'm going to have a hard stop at a specific time. And I'm not going to eat these things anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of those has pros and cons. And you just kind of have to decide what works for you and what you want to do. And yeah, and that's kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have done all three different approaches over the years. And for me now, I know I want to stay on plan. Like I don't, there's not enough pleasure in those foods
Mm-hmm.
for me to make it worth the pain that comes from
Mm-hmm.
eating those things.
Exactly.
So what I choose to do is, for me on carnivore, there are certain foods that I think of as kind of like carnivore candy. So pepperoni is one of those things. Scallops is one of those things. So things that are expensive or, you know, just kind of fun foods or, exotic or different. Those are things that I try to get for the
Mm-hmm.
holidays. So I still feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm eating something special and it's different. It's not what I eat every day, but it's still on plan. So for this Thanksgiving, I've got scallops and beef bacon, and
Mm-hmm.
so I'm going to do something with that. And then I'm sure I'll have some other main kind of meat. Maybe I'll get a ribeye. I don't know. So that's kind of an approach. And yes, if you're going home to a family occasion where your uncle makes some special meal that you really only can get once a year or twice a year, then maybe have it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. If you're a sugar addict and you really think that you're addicted to sugar, and like you have a physical addiction to sugar, then it's going to be really hard to have those sweets and
Mm-hmm.
then get back on track. So you have to decide whether you want to battle with that, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe you have to really kind of see. So it's kind of up to you, but um so that's the recommendation I make. And then if you are concerned or you aren't able, you find you're not able to get back on track, like
Mm-hmm.
my challenge is a great way to just
Mm-hmm.
join it and just get started. Have the community. You're in a Facebook group with other people who are all trying to do the same thing. The people who are posting their progress pictures, or they're posting their before and afters. And I think that that really helps
Mm-hmm.
people to, to have the, just the strength to,
Mm-hmm.
kind of continue on something that is pretty difficult. So that's my suggestion on the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well,
not easy.
yeah, yeah, I know. You have to really be mindful of before you go in there and you plan. Yeah, it's interesting that you said like you really have to know what you're gonna do. If you're gonna go keto, go keto. You stay on track. If you're gonna go the heck with it, then just know what it could potentially do to you the next day, or what does you, again, it's just self-awareness at the end
Hmm.
of the day, being self-aware. If you're, you know that you're a sugar addict, then you're it's the best for you to stay away from that stuff, right?
Hmm.
A lot of self-awareness, lots of obviously mindfulness. um do you practice any mindfulness tools with your journey, with your overall like health holistically? Do you ever do you meditate, or how do you practice mindfulness? I just want to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I have really tried to incorporate a lot of different, mental health tools over the years. I have at times done a lot of cognitive behavioral
Mm,
therapy, which I think is a really, really helpful tool for people. And I definitely encourage you to add that. I currently meditate twice a day.
mm,
I'm still trying to make the evening time work. So I just, I get tired at a certain point, and then, boom, I'm just going to fall asleep
mhm,
instantly in
mhm.
my meditation. So my morning meditation is perfect. My nighttime one, I think I need to do it by like 6 p.m. Otherwise it's just not going to work. So that's what I struggle with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is important, all of those, those mental health things that we do. I think all of those are important,
Mhm,
but until you turn off the physical drives that are going on, you can't actually make them work.
mhm,
So if you're physically hungry because and getting hunger signals because you've eaten a dozen donuts but have not eaten any real food, like you're just not going to be able to like have a normal and sane response to your boss yelling at you, or some major change at work that happens suddenly. Like you're just not going to have the mental bandwidth to deal with that. But once you're properly fed and healthy, then you can deal with these other mental health things, and you can use these tools that you pick up in the books and that you read about or you do with your therapist. So so I think all of those things are good, but I just, I don't think that they work until you get your physical body under under control.
love that. I want to be respectful of your time. We're already over time here. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story. Black Carnivore on Facebook if you need that support, if you're struggling with your lifestyle right now and just can't stay consistent. Black Carnivore on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, guys. This has been a blast. Thank you once again for coming on, sharing your story. I'm so appreciative of you, and love your work. uh, I will support your work. I will link all your links down below so everybody can check that out. um, Black Carnivore, guys. Thank you once again. Ede, appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye bye.